The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path. A path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Today's episode is Elephants, the Grass and War.
Welcome, everybody, to Created in the Image of God. I'm your host, Wade Franson, and if all went as planned, and I'm a prophet, then this is May 24th, and it's episode 249. In the studio, I have Chinyere, who goes by Chi Egbe, who is a distinguished professor. He's a Nigerian-born economist and tenured full professor at Medgar Evers College at CUNY in New York, where he has taught business statistics and finance since 1989. He's distinguished in a number of ways, including having served as deputy chair, dean of the School of Business, and consortial faculty for CUNY's School of Professional Studies. He's led major accreditation efforts, launched new degree programs, the first fully online degree of its kind, helped create a financial markets simulation lab that brings Wall Street style learning to Brooklyn, New York. And he's driven local economic development programs in the community. But we're really here to talk about his backstory and the experiences he had leading up to all this when he was living in Nigeria. Welcome to the studio, Chinyere.
Thank you very much for inviting me to your show. I'll be very, very glad to have a conversation with you. I've had what I would rather call an eventful or exciting existence as a person. I've gone through quite a bit of experiences, and those experiences have in many ways influenced my perspective from my parents, from school, from my teachers, who I revere very much. I always loved my teachers. And so today I'm teaching, which is one of my passions as a child.
And as we always do on this show, we like to ask about your creation story, which is particularly pertinent in your case because of a book you wrote, which is titled Elephants, the Grass, and the Teacher. And this book covers your personal experiences during the Nigerian Civil War from 1967 to 1970, a situation that many Americans perhaps are not familiar with, but many important lessons. So let's just dive into that backstory. Tell us a little bit about your parents, the circumstances you were born into, and the events leading up to your experiences in that war.
Well, if you see throughout my book, I made a lot of reference to divine intervention because a lot of things that happen, my family, somehow escaped many close calls, or let me say several close calls to annihilation. And I reflected back on it, writing my story, and to say, I could not see, even as a statistician, what's the probability that we could have escaped all of these? And I say, these were divine interventions. But let me get back to my background, and in fact, how those experiences led me into writing a book about the Civil War in Nigeria. I was born by parents who were, I would say, great parents to have, in the sense that they provided me, guidance based on, I would say, the experiences. My father was a teacher, a celebrated teacher, who, many people that passed through him really loved him very, very much and were willing to do a whole lot for him. My mother was a dedicated housewife and a mother who made a lot of sacrifices just so that her children would survive and so that her children will grow up with, I would say, stable mental and spiritual foundations. My mother was a giving mother to the very, very, very end. Now, my father was a London educated educator, a biologist, an agricultural scientist by training. My mother was a Bible-wielding mother who depended a lot on prayer and God in whatever she was doing and whatever advice she gave us. I was born in colonial Nigeria, that is, in Nigeria that was still under the British colony. I went to school when there was a lot of, I would say, regimentation and discipline in education. Even in the social environment, good behavior was, directly rewarded. So I always believed in process, in procedure. And I grew up with, I would say, a rather rigid sense of fairness, of right and wrong. Given that my dad was very well known as a civil servant who was, according to his own perspective, uncorrupted, I was, in a sense, I behaved myself. I wouldn't do anything wrong because if I did, somebody would immediately say, I'm going to tell your dad. And that was all I needed. Many of my contemporaries would joke that if you came back from school and said your teacher disciplined you or he whipped you because you didn't do your homework, you will get into more trouble. And that was not just me. My contemporaries will tell you that. You better not tell your dad that the teacher disciplined you because you did something or he whipped you because you're going to get another whipping. And so if you did something wrong in school and you were disciplined, you better keep it to yourself. And so that shaped my mind quite a bit. I'm not saying that today's Nigeria is like that. I'm not saying that everything is still so. I'm not saying that it is not. But what I'm saying is that shaped my mind a lot. And maybe I took it much more, I took it to my heart, much more so than a lot of people. But there are still people, my contemporaries, who still, take it to heart and believe in it. So I had a sharp sense, I will say again, a rigid sense of right and wrong. Not only among individuals, but even among societies. And so I could see a lot of things that happen in society, and I'm saying, this is not right. I see, and this is why I titled my book, Elephants, the Grass, and the Teacher. Now, let me begin with elephants. When I look at the world, I said that God has provided enough for everybody to have enough. And the only reason you have wars come from the fundamental instinct that leads to greed. And it's the ruling establishment that very often start wars. They do not start the war because there's something so wrong that human beings cannot dialogue among each other and share. Because I believe in sharing, that if we all share, then there'll be no need for wars. But this is not what's going on. And at the end of any war, the masses, the grass, are the ones that live with the continuing pain of war. The destruction is a destruction of the masses. Now, if you think about it, look at proportions. Since I do statistics, what percentage of major generals, what percentage of brigade commanders die in a war? What percentage of privates and corporals and sergeants and lower ranks of the military, like second lieutenants. Second lieutenants are usually platoon commanders. There's commanders of 30 people. And so they are the ones, they face as much bullet as the privates, because they are the ones directing the fire. Major generals sit in cozy offices, cozy desks, and sit down there and calculate that they're going to put 50,000 men or 10,000 men out there in open field, and 2,000 are going to be dead. Like they are counting dimes and nickels. But these are people's children. These are people's fathers. These are people's uncles that they are counting like they're counting nickels and dimes. Not even chickens, because chickens have blood. When you stab a chicken, the chicken will run. Okay? If you stab a dime, the dime will not run because the dime feels no pain. But we are wrong. And so you can see that I made analogies and even made references to people who had seen this point before me. At the beginning, I used a reference to ancient Rome, where an ancient Roman reformer called Gaius Gracchus, quoted, of course, by a Roman poet, Lucius Mysterius Plutarchus, that we call Plutarch, said that commanders make a grievous error. They send masses of people to go and fight for their monuments, for their mansions, and for their altars and what have you. He said, at the end of the day, these masses of people do not benefit from war more than the air that they breathe, that is free. Who owns the altars and the mansions they're defending? The commanders. And what percentage of commanders die in a war? What percentage of privates die in a war? And who are privates? Who are corporals? Who are sergeants? The masses of the people. They are the privates. They are the ones that absorb all the shock of dodging bullets, dodging knife blows, dodging the spears. And if you look at the history of war, the great commanders sit on horseback far from the action and direct people to keep going until the casualties are too many. And they do not withdraw or change tactics until they actually see that they're not able to win and that the action might not come close to them. Then they order a retreat. I mean, I have seen battle, not only in enactment, but also direct experience. And so this is why when I looked at it in my own sharp sense of justice, I say the ruling establishments, they are the ones that make decisions about war. The masses of the people have no say in what starts war, when it is started, and they have no say in the benefits. Because at the end of this, I asked in my book at the very beginning, how many private soldiers purchased new Mercedes-Benz cars at the end of the war? How many built new mansions? The people that bought new Mercedes-Benz cars, who get all the credit for winning the war and for their leadership, are the division commanders, the major generals, the brigadier generals. They are the ones, but how many of them dodge bullets? This is the theme of my book.
Sorry, I was on mute just listening. That's a powerful analysis. And I was also wanting to comment on something you said earlier about, where these wars come from. And you pulled it straight out of the Bible without referencing it, the Apostle Paul, from whence come wars and fighting among you. They come from your greed, your desire, your lusts.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, God provides enough for everything. Even the sparrows have homes and food. So So as you were living in Nigeria, just tell us a little bit about what you saw unfolding on the ground. What was behind this particular civil war that erupted in 1967, and what was your experience with it?
In fact, what led to the eruption of war, again, was the struggle among the key players in the ruling establishment. And let me talk about the events first, just as events, and then where the leadership came into it. And one of I would say my publishers, I have a website, a dedicated Facebook page for this book. And one of the pictures, is captioned "When Leadership Fails." And it's not about leadership of one side failing. They're talking about broad leadership, the ruling establishment, when they fail. So let me begin with just events. As events, when Nigeria gained independence on October 1, 1960, based on, I would say, a broad demand for the British, the colonizers or the colonial masters. They must leave. We can rule ourselves, and I have no problem with people ruling themselves.
Was that a relatively peaceful transition? The independence?
Yes, it was relatively peaceful in the sense that it was negotiated.
Yep.
It's not in the case where there was guerrilla warfare. It was negotiated over a period of time, beginning from 1945, right after the Second World War. Nigerians really began to put pressure and began to negotiate their independence from the British, and constitutions were drafted. One I could reference is the 1951 Macpherson Constitution. And so from that point on, Nigeria negotiated and continued until around 1957. We had what we call self-rule. And so on October 1, 1960, finally, Nigeria gained its independence following elections conducted by the British in 1959. And so the system that was established was essentially based on the Westminster system, where there was a governor general, a ceremonial president, there was a lower house, and then there was the upper house. At the federal level, you had the Senate, which was secular, and then the House of Assembly. The regional levels, there were three regions: Eastern region, Northern region, and the Western region. You had the lower house of Parliament, or House of Representatives, and then an upper house that was called the House of Chiefs, which I would say, at least in my perspective, was a mimic of the British House of Lords, which was essentially, not really elected. So the House of Chiefs in the regions were not really truly elected. And they represented I would say, the pre-colonial ruling aristocracy, who were, what we still call traditional rulers in that sense of the word. In any event, shortly after independence, 1962, there was a crisis, and then elections to be held in 1964 and 1965. Again, the way I wrote it bluntly in my book, our leaders were not able to conduct elections without the supervision of the colonial master, because the elections of 1959 were peaceful, very peaceful. But once the election came into our hands, we could not conduct basic election. And so in 1964 and 1965, the elections in Western Nigeria in 1964 and elections at the federal level in 1965 degenerated into violence. And the Western Nigeria in particular was just horrible. leaders clashed. And, and so in January 1966, a group of army officers decided that the system was not only corrupt, but the violence from the elections were simply not tolerable. And so they decided to overthrow the government, not only charging that the events around the country was going to degenerate, and besides that, that the system that was established was corrupt. And so one of their agendas was to eliminate corruption, which of course they have not. Now, the thing that was...
So I'm going to ask us to put a pin in that for now, for the moment, because we have to go to a commercial break. We can't let these recorded segments get too long. It just causes problems on the upload. So we're going to hold this thought. And I think this is a good pivot point, because when we come back, I'm going to ask a couple of questions before we then talk about the next events in Nigeria. Don't go anywhere. We're about to really get into the meat of today's show with Professor Chinyere Egbe about his book, Elephants, the Grass, and a Teacher, and the Civil War in Nigeria. We'll be right back.
Experience the gripping and personal journey of survival and resilience in the face of one of Africa's most devastating conflicts. Dr. Chinyere Egbe's Elephants, the Grass, and a Teacher takes you deep into the heart of the Nigeria-Biafra War, unveiling the untold stories of ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a personal journey through the harrowing experiences of the Nigerian Civil War, from almost being executed to being saved by a family photograph. The Egbe family story shows the surprising ways they survived the war. Dr. Egbe's reflections offer more than just memories. They provide lessons on leadership, the folly of war, and the endurance of love and family. Learn history from someone who lived it, felt it, and survived it. Elephants, the Grass, and a Teacher, an audacious contribution to the historiography of the Nigerian Civil War. Dive into a story that will educate, inspire, and move you. Available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Welcome back to Created in the Image of God. We're here with Dr. Chinyere Egbe, professor, statistician, author, and he was just explaining to us how we went from a relatively peaceful transition from colonial rulership to independence, and an election that was deemed reasonable, and how that then how the social contract, if you will, and the trust began to erode, collapse, descend into violence, all as a precursor to civil war. And what I want to ask before we move on in the Nigerian story is, do you see any parallels with what's gone on in America in the last 20 years, with the polarization in these United States, with the claims and counterclaims of election fraud, illegitimacy of elections, foreign interference, to the point where there is so much distrust that we actually have had political violence in the form of assassinations and lots of, beginning stages of various forms of terrorism in the United States. Do you see parallels with what you experienced in Nigeria during those early years before the Civil War?
Well, let me put it this way. The only parallel that I see is that at the core, somewhere subliminally, in any kind of political turbulence, is the ruling establishment. Members of the ruling establishment seeking their advantages in the process, and seeking to dominate and seeking to appropriate for themselves whatever resources are available in society for their own advantages. Now, when you compare the claims of election fraud and counterclaims and the political turbulence and the distrust you look at, say, the Western world or even just the United States. There's a big difference here, okay? Here in the United States, these differences and whatever turbulence and even political assassinations, the assassination of Kennedy, the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan, the apparent attempted assassination of Donald Trump, with the bullet grazing his ear and what have you, the difference is ideological. It's always ideological. Now, even if you go back to the, I would say, political turbulence about slavery, the difference was ideological. It was not like this entire group of so-called white Americans, and I call them European Americans, against the African slaves, because the African slaves were essentially powerless. Powerless in the sense, relatively powerless, because they did not have the machinery or the infrastructure or the instruments of production where they controlled guns and they had their own territory. No, it was just among the European Americans believing that chattel slavery was something that they wanted to sustain. Okay, and I could go into historical analysis on that, why chattel slavery existed in America. And honestly, give me a moment, let me look at it. Okay, now it all goes down to relative power among peoples. The chattel slavery that Americans brought back in the 17th century, practically 1,300 years or even 1,000 years after chattel slavery ended in Europe. Okay, it's about when people have the power, they want to exploit whoever they can exploit. They exploit nature. If, for example, people of African origin had the technology to make guns and gunpowder, and the people of European origin have not known that technology, this slavery would have been Africans enslaving white people. It would have happened. Because in every society, there is that class-based, power-based exploitation. So I understand it in that sense. And so now when you look at the turbulence in America or the distrust and claims and counterclaims, it's purely ideological. It's not based on ethnicity, say Italian Americans and Jewish Americans, what have you. In Nigeria and in many African countries, this election turbulence you deal with, let me say, again, this is just a way to make reference to proportions. 10% ideological and 90% ethnically based turbulence. Believing that one ethnic group feels cheated if another ethnic group is the president. Because we are beginning to cut across it in Nigeria now and in many African countries to say, hey, ethnicity is not the issue. The issue is who is going to make everybody well. But
so just to clarify, to make sure I understood, and I think I did, what you're saying is that in America, it's more ideological than ethnic, yes, despite claims to the contrary. Whereas in Africa, traditionally, historically, it's been actually mostly based on ethnicity, different ethnic groups, even among the same race, but you have tribalism, you have ethnicity, and those played a bigger role in Africa than currently in America, which I agree with. I'm just making sure if I understood it correctly.
Yes, you understand. You understood it very correctly.
Because issues of identity, race, ethnicity, are exploited by the powerful in order to align peoples with their ideology, using these hooks or these triggers, these frankly mental viruses, to infect them with ideas around that affect their identity, that go deep and cause them to align with this ideology or that ideology.
The point then is that the ruling establishment within each ethnic group is making it appear as if the fortunes and misfortunes of the ordinary people within their own ethnic group are influenced by the other ethnic group as a group, when in fact they are simply playing on those ethnic differences and religious differences for their own benefits. That's what they're doing. And to the extent that they cut across the other ethnic group, they're simply looking for allies who are paid off in the other ethnic group to simply align with them, but they are playing on the ethnic differences in a rather superficial way, I would say misleading way, because it's misleading. But they're not trying to provide.
And to tie this in with an earlier point, the grass, if in your analogy, being trampled by the elephants, right? The grass has no say. The wind is blowing it this way, the wind is blowing it that way. And the wind are those powerful elements who are actually causing the people to vote and decide against their own best interests.
Yes. Now, let me look at even contemporary Nigeria, and many people, many enlightened people across ethnic groups are saying it. For example, in northern Nigeria, where the indices of poverty and deprivation are most high, many enlightened people in northern Nigeria are saying to their fellow northern Nigerians, let's be honest about it, northerners have held power over the years, and they make you believe that the other ethnic groups are going to cheat you if you elect one of them into power. But when at the end of the day, our elite have held more power, but our masses, you can see among our masses high indices of poverty and deprivation. There's more homelessness among them. There's more poverty among them. There's more disease among them. But their leaders have held power much more than any other group of leaders. So the issue is not the other ethnic group against you. It's not. It's just that these people are using religion and ethnicity to make themselves wealthy and comfortable at your expense. And it is true. And this is now, as I was saying, in January 1966, now we had this coup. Now, what's unfortunate about that whole event was that the leaders of the coup were from one particular ethnic group, from an Eastern Nigerian Igbo ethnic group. The preponderance of the leaders, it doesn't mean that all of them were from that group, but the preponderance. Now, the casualties, they killed, they murdered the leaders of the other parts of Nigeria, and excluded members of their own ethnic group, or at least they were not there. It was not as if they schemed to do it, but the way they carried it out and the outcome, what was manifested, was that the leaders of other ethnic groups were murdered, military leaders, political leaders, and the leaders of their own ethnic group were not there, except for one military person that died. So any way you look at it, anybody that looks at it from the outside, if you got somebody from the moon to come and look at it, they will say, oh yes, this was an ethnic scheme. When in fact, and I analyzed it in my book, it was not really an ethnic scheme, but if you were on the other side, what would you think? Or what would you say? Or at least it provided an opportunity for provocators to say, hey, look, they murdered our leaders and they left their own leaders alone. Now, that led to quite a bit of suspicion. And so, 6 months after that, then there was a counter coup, which again was ethnically biased. All right, fine and good. At that point, degenerated into a crisis, which eventually led to ethnic cleansing of the Igbo ethnic group, not only in the military, but a mass slaughter, a mass massacre by northern Nigerians against Igbos, driving them out of practically every part of Nigeria. And so it degenerated into a crisis that was going to cause the country to break down, and threats of secession were heard. But there was an attempt to negotiate, to say, okay, let tempers cool down and we'll get back together as a country. There, very clearly, leaders on both sides, and this is my point, leaders on both sides were treacherous. There were warmongers on both sides. There were leaders in Eastern Nigeria, my own ethnic group, who wanted secession. And I can tell you here boldly, and I said it in my book, so I'm not saying it for the first time, these people now were not like having these daydreams and hopes of becoming a sovereign nation, being ministers, being a head of state. And this is the way I look at it. Now, leaders on the other side also felt like this was their opportunity to suppress, to not dominate the politics by crushing any kind of, I would say, real participation of Eastern Nigerians, and especially the Igbo ethnic group. And so they wanted war. And leaders in the Eastern Nigeria also wanted war. Not so much because they were trying to protect the Igbo ethnic group, but because now they had dreams of becoming international figures or dominating resources, especially the oil that was now discovered in Eastern Nigeria. And so to me, it was all about trying to establish their own advantages for their own personal aggrandizement on both sides. And so negotiations to have peace were undermined at every stage. And I made that analysis very, very, very clear in my book, this extensive analysis, why you could see the treachery on both sides. And so in May 1967, the Eastern Nigerian governor declared a secession of Eastern Nigeria from the rest of Nigeria. And I made my point very, very clear that in as much as there were conditions that were difficult to deal with, there were also personal ambitions involved on both sides.
So this is fascinating, and we may have to have you back because there's so much here to unpack. Simply, even just the history, and history is so important, and understanding, the geopolitical realities of the past, the present. But as you've done here, the analysis on some of the underlying motivations, the underlying causes, the unfolding, it's been well worth the time we've spent. But I want to ask one more question about this, and then we're going to have to go to another commercial break real quick.
Sure.
And come up and ask what's next for you, what's next on the horizon. The question is the book itself and the impact. I'm sure you've had discussions. I don't know that. Sadly, I don't know that huge numbers of people are reading it. They probably should. It's a very powerful example and discussion. But what has been the impact and the feedback and the results of having published this book?
Well, I don't think that the book has been widely read in Nigeria. And I wish it was. Because if they do, I suspect I will get a backlash from both sides.
And that's usually one of the issues here, right? If you pander, or as they say, throw red meat to one side, your book can become popular. But if you're more objective, it's it's the kind that maybe neither side is too excited about because it doesn't tell the story their way or the way they want it told.
This is precisely what I said in the book, that books that have been written before this one are one-sided. Because I did raise the question on both sides. If you were on the other side, what would you do? Would you have, just stood by and watched the events and felt like, well, things are going right? The answer is no. And it goes back to generally how human beings respond. And I use a lot of proverbs in my native language and in English and even in Latin to describe the events. And so the few people that I know a lot of people have read the book, both from my ethnic group and from the other side. And I think that many people from my ethnic group, a few people say, okay, yes, you are being objective, but some people have been very, very critical. One person said to me, do not be too harsh on our leadership. Some say, well, because they were not experienced, but my response is, these leaders had people that had more experience than them. They should have brought them in. But out of their selfishness, they didn't bring them in. And I mean, I got philosophical about it in the sense that I say, put it this way. If somebody said that John offended them and they want to go and kill John, and they take a baseball bat, I would say to them, you're not serious. Because to hit John with the baseball bat, you would have to get close to him. If he is more skilled at hand-to-hand fight, he might take the bat from you and break your head first. If you really want to do it and do it right, get a gun, hide, and shoot him. Now, this is not to say that I advocate killing somebody. I am saying if you want to do it, this is the way to do it. And so in my book, I explained what the other side was doing. Why did the federal government, people on the federal side, undermine some aspects of the agreement? Why is it that the Biafran side failed? If you want to fight a war, you should get ready for the war. And I said, the Biafran side was not ready for war. This is not how to fight a war. If you want to fight a war, war leads to strange bedfellows. You have to have alliances. You have to be prepared to share the loot. If you don't, you're going to lose the war. And I said the Biafran leadership was so selfish and blinded by their selfishness that they did not want to share the loot. Why do you think somebody's going to join you in a war where they're going to sustain casualties, but you're not giving them what it takes for them to have an incentive to join you? It's like mercenaries. Mercenaries, they're not joining you in a war because they agree with you. They're joining you in a war because they're taking a calculated risk. If they survive it, they make a lot of money and enjoy it. If they don't survive it, they're dead. And the dead man has no shame. Dead man feels no pain. This is why mercenaries fight. It's not because they like you. It's not because they're happy with you. And throughout my book, I made those analogies. The Nigerian side undermined the peace process, both during the war and before the war, because there were certain things they would have done, and I cited the examples, more specifically in the book, that they will in effect, be handing over resources to a potential enemy. If I was on their side, I will not. I will do exactly what they're doing, because they're going to deny you resources so that if, in the end, war starts, they have the ability to defeat you. But that's exactly what happened. There were points where the peace process was undermined because it will require a transfer of resources to a potential adversary, a potential military, a potential violent adversary. Why would they be handing over resources to you? Of course, I will not. But if you had the military ability, for example, and if they could see you have a military ability, they will probably hand over those resources to you because they don't want war. And again, I provided analogies from other wars, from the Second World War, where the Soviet Union was providing resources to the Germans so as to avoid war, even though it did not succeed. But I pointed out also why Hitler should never have invaded Russia.
Right. So I think that's again a good segue to break this segment. But what I'm hearing, and we'll talk about this when we come back,
okay,
is that you're an economist.
Yes.
And you have that lens also to analyze these things in an objective way. The World War II example is very fascinating. I spent many years in Europe. I've studied World War II, in particular because, if Hitler had been more rational, right, that would have ended very differently.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Anyway, we'll be right back to wrap this up when we come back from this quick commercial break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more of Chinyere Egbe.
In a world where religions often talk past each other, what if we just sat down and listened? Facets of One is a simple devotional, bringing together scripture from the world's faiths, centered on one truth: God is one. From the Bible to the Quran, from Krishna to Christ, each voice speaks in turn, without argument, without division. You don't have to agree on everything. Just be willing to pray, to listen, and to come together. If you're longing for something deeper than noise and division, this is a different kind of conversation. Facets of One. Many voices, one God. Will you start a circle?
Welcome back to the wrap up here with Dr. Chinyere Egbe. We've just concluded hearing about his analysis really as an economist on some of these things, human behavior, decisions that are made, why they're made, in terms of understanding the dynamics, and hopefully learning pragmatically maybe how to avoid some of these things. There are certainly, taking this grand global geopolitical scale, also examples that we can use in our own life, with our own situation, our families, people that we have to make peace with, negotiate with, align with. But tell me, so people can get your book, I assume, anywhere, or Amazon.com, Barnes & Nobles, they can walk in and order it at any bookstore, I assume, or they can find it online?
Yes, I mean, right now the book is available on Barnes & Nobles. It's available on Amazon. Amazon has become one place that you easily get any book there.
Right.
Yeah. So yes, the book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles.
And so tell us a little bit now about your current phase as an educator, how all of this is playing out, and what's next for you on the horizon.
What's next for me on the horizon? I mean, I've been in academia for the last 40-something years, 42 years. And so maybe what's on the horizon for me is retiring, but not retiring quietly. I'm still involved in some projects. I would like to continue to work on this book. An audio version is on the way. I recently edited it for a second edition, which updated some information, but also added information about my family experiences, because this was really the crux of the book. The first 11 chapters out of 17 was on my family experiences and how we overcame, I would say, escaped several close calls with annihilation. There was a point where my entire family was to be executed and only to be saved by a picture, a family picture that my father had taken with one of the commanders who actually sent for the family to be arrested and executed. And that saved us, where I was captured and tortured. And again, because of my daddy's influence, I was not executed. I was not, the torturing stopped. My sister got lost, and, which I called an act of God, how I eventually retrieved her in a forest where there was absolutely no way of guessing that this is where she would be. I stumbled onto her.
So some of those coincidences that couldn't possibly have been coincidence coming from a statistician, right, are part of the reason why the viewers should go and get this book, Elephants, the Grass, and a Teacher by Chinyere Egbe. You see his name there on Amazon, and read those amazing stories for yourself and spread the word about this book. So we are out of time, sadly. I hope to invite you back, but please share final words with the audience.
I would love to be back. I mean, the personal family story has not been told,
Yes.
the events that happened. And so I would love to really be back. There are life-changing experiences that I think would interest any audience. Maybe next time, hopefully, I will focus on those life-changing experiences and connect them to the divine, to divinity, to God, because there's just no way I can explain them. Thank you very much.
And any final words for the audience to consider?
Yes, one final word I would like to have for the audience is, let us as human beings think and understand that dialogue is very important. There is enough, provided by God Almighty, that we all can be comfortable. And if we just share, and if we have differences, there is opportunity for dialogue, and dialogue is far superior to conflict. Even in economic analysis, in von Neumann game theory, you find out at the end of the day that cooperation is superior to competition. And that is also in the Bible. It's, if you have aught with your brother, forgive them.
And a man who will have friends must show himself friendly, right? There's another proverb. Yes. And my sign off here, as I always do, is you are created in the image of God. All of us, each and every one of us, in all of our diversity of thought, temperament, and wherever we come from. You are created in the image of God, and God loves his creation. Stay tuned for the sneak peek of next week's show, and we'll see you all back here, same time, same place, for Created in the Image of God. Thank you, Dr. Egbe. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you also, Wade. I'm glad that I was here, and I look forward to coming back.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Stay tuned for the sneak peek. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Next week on Created in the Image of God. Sunday, May 31st at 7 a.m. Central Time, host Wade Franson interviews Jocelyn Jones, author, ordained minister, and founder of Faith on the Journey Counseling. She shares a Christ-centered approach to healing from trauma, grief, and shame through forgiveness, emotional freedom, and spiritual restoration. From breaking the power of hidden pain to helping women step into purpose, healing, and ministry. And then on Tuesday, June 2nd at 8 p.m. Central Time, host Wade Franson interviews Eric Davis, Christian author and storyteller. What began as a dream of restoring a historic plantation became a terrifying encounter with spiritual darkness. From demonic oppression and fear to deliverance, healing, and freedom through Christ. Join us live this week, Tuesday and Sunday, Created in the Image of God.